Let's pin that. How's it going? I think we're live. That's exciting. Yes. Just check this is working. So it used to be that these bonus bits that, oh, you can't see my face. Wait a minute, I can do better with this. Oh, and there we are. Used to be that I'd crop these bonus bits. Hello. Yeah, I used to crop these bits, but it got rid of the chat, so I thought I'll keep them in. How's it going? Hello, everyone. Yeah, pretty much. Hello. Ah, we got some Welshies on. Excellent. Look at this. Look at this. Everyone can hear me. Type. Oh, Sarah, I see what you mean. Yeah. And the other good thing about me leaving the chat is I don't have to lengthily read out every comment. I can just sort of vaguely gesticulate towards you. Sarah, you're right. I can physically call in. Hello, everyone. What time is it? I take it you can hear me. There is audio. Yeah. Someone just go yeah for audio. I always have to check because at some point this thing, where is it? This thing, the battery's going to go, and I won't know about it. And I'll have to flick to the other audio source that I have. So I do have a backup, which doesn't require batteries. Excellent. You can hear me. Marvellous. Hello, everyone. I've got tea. Oh, wait a minute. Let's do something like this. Hello, good evening. Welcome to episode 3 of Rail Natter. I have my tea. Yeah, hello. Let me get the live stream back. Excellent. Right. Well, a pleasure to have you all joining for this episode 3, the 4th episode of Rail Natter. Let's not worry about that. I started at 0. I like to be awkward. This episode is going to be about, the theme, as I always say, this is an open chat. Rail Natter is an open forum. We're all here, particularly in these trying times when we're all locked in our houses. We're here as friends to chat about railways, and it doesn't really matter what the theme is, because if you've got another thing you want to talk about, feel free to just launch that in. So I try and make the overall chat, the theme, not actually an hour long. Waffle. Yeah, so today the plan is that we're going to chat about. Let's do this. The plan is we're going to chat about rail over the Pennines, by which I mean we're just going to talk about each of the railway lines over the Pennines, chat a little bit about, share some stories we have about them, perhaps think about what the future holds for them, what the past held for them, and just general chatter. We'll do it in chronological order, so we'll work our way through. We can look at how many lines there were. Oh yeah, that's right. There was a question which was how many lines are there? So some of you can start answering that and what you reckon the answer is. Some of you are going to shout at me about my methodology, which I'm cool with. Lewis is pointing out that he didn't know I was a programmer, which is why I started at 0. Yeah, although it was only because basically I did that HS2 one, which is sort of a bit of a trial run for this. And then I uploaded it to YouTube and made it number 0 because reasons. So I need to stop erring. What have we got? So let's see. Let's have a before I even start. We're 3 minutes in and already I'm off on tangents. We've got lots of friendly, familiar faces. Lee. We've got Michael C. We've got loads of people. We've got Milan. We've got Simon Fisher's here. He's already voting to reinstate Woodhead with 1500 DC. No, Simon, no 1500 DC. We can get DC clearances with AC now, thanks to surge arresters, so we don't need it to be DC. Lovely. There we go. Good. Okay, everyone's here. That's excellent. Happy days. I think it only remains to basically kick things off. Oh, wait a minute. Let's get my face cam up. Yeah. Do this professionally. It only remains to kick things off. The lovely music fading, the Intercity 225 disappearing off. Let's kick off. So, let's go back down to miniature mode. Firstly though, as you can see, the railway office behind me hasn't changed much. At some point when things change, I'll point it out, like for example me putting things on the shelves. Let's go here, let's get the slides up and let's get cracking. Who's here? Everyone's saying it. Sarah's saying 5. Right, okay, so we'll get there. Okay, forget it. We'll get there. There are people looking at this. There's lots of people discussing the methodology already. This is exciting. Feel free to continue to chat amongst yourselves. Right. So let's go. Firstly, that's the title card. Firstly, before we press on, I was in a podcast which was really cool. For any of you, there might even be some of you who are joining, having watched me or heard me sort of laughing mostly in this. This is Well, There's Your Problem, which is an absolutely brilliant podcast. It's really good fun to be on. It's really good fun to listen to. Don't go on there if you're expecting like a boring, this is the perfect situation, or this is the kind of every single minute detail. If you want perfect accuracy, it's not the place to go. It's a place that lots of reasonably intelligent people laugh and be light-hearted, but talk about engineering disasters and their wider political context. And it's great fun. I'd recommend having a listen. We're lucky in this one because it was, spoilers, reasonably harmless. Anyway, go and have a watch and listen. Subscribe to Justin's brilliant as well. Do Not Eat. Go and find his YouTube page. It's absolutely amazing. Liam and Alice are good fun. Real pleasure to be hosted by those guys. So if you're say hi in the chat if you're here having heard that, because it's a pleasure to have you along. So there's that. Right, that was an ad. Another ad. I'm developing new ideas. And this one is essentially going to be, I was trying to work out a way to do, I was going to do a series of Railways Explained as a series, which I can still do potentially, and probably will in kind of for more detailed things where I'm kind of meandering around. But I quite like the idea of doing them with City Skylines. So I'm going to use City Skylines, which is a city builder, a bit like old SimCity 2000, if anyone on here is not a current gamer. To be fair, neither am I these days. But anyway, it's an excuse for me to pick it up and spend an hour in it, but use it as an excuse to teach Permanent Way stuff. So it's going to be called, the series is going to be called The Permanent Way. I will be doing it, and it'll go out on Fridays, I think. They're going to be short. They're just going to be really short because the whole point is that I don't have to spend hours creating them, because I've been working on a video at the moment that I've spent so many hours on, and it should be good, but it's tiring. So look forward to that. There's Britain. It's a slice of Britain, in fact. Let's see where everyone is. Right, Going to say 5. Hope that Calder, Copy Pit. Copy Pit. Ooh, interesting. Okay, lots of suggestions. There's some seriously deep chat. Mostly harmless. Yep. Podcast. Oh yeah, the podcast is good. There will be a link in the description, but again, it's on my Twitter feed. I will try and put that in. Some people have read my article about tilting trains. Yeah, it's become ever relevant because there was a piece in Railway Gazette International about the fact that they've been continuing to do that testing work. It's on Medium. Find it on Medium. Just do Google Gareth Dennis tilting trains and it'll probably come up. Lee is really pushing his proposals. Right. Sarah is asking how good my CPU is to run City Skylines at better than a snail's pace. Not great, but I'm going to just have a really simple, I'm not going to try and do it with like huge maps. I'm going to start with just like a blank page and do like basic sort of, here is a straight, here are curves. And there'll be other chat, and it'll be kind of like, it'll be both chat about the Permanent Way in the context, but also a little bit of like, within City Skylines, these are things that you can kind of do. So hopefully it'll do both, be informative for people who don't give a stuff about City Skylines, and also be useful for people who want to model more realistic railways in City Skylines. Double whammy. Michael wants me to use Transport Fever. There are only so many games I can get into, and City Skylines is good because it kind of does vaguely model the bigger picture. And whilst I'm an engineer and like detail, I do like the bigger picture. I like the way railways fit into the wider context. Oh, this is already deeply segued, hasn't it? Anyway, David Shearers is here. If track is Permanent Way, what does that say about OLE and signalling equipment? It says that you can move it out of the way if you need to. No, the permanent way really is all the fixed infrastructure that makes a railway. And I'd argue that OLE kind of falls into that Venn diagram, or if there's a Venn diagram, the two overlap quite a bit. Right, so let's get cracking. I've waffled. It's already 10 minutes in, and I've waffled away. So here's a slice of Britain, and here's the Pennines. For any of you who are on this that don't know, the Pennines is the kind of the overall broad name for it's basically the backbone of Britain, or is it called the backbone of Britain? It's a kind of a hill range. I'm not going to say mountain range because they aren't mountains, but it's a range of hills that runs from the Scottish border and the Cheviots southwards, right the way through between, kind of connects up to the Lake District and the Cumbrian Hills, the Cumbrian Fells, split by the Lune Gorge actually. So that wonderful bit of railway in the M6 and anyway, the A6 goes down through past Newcastle. Over the Tyneside, Teesside, goes down between Manchester on one side, on the west, and Leeds on the east, and then essentially gets all the way down to Stoke. Right, the Pennine Way. This is a walking route. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the oldest long-distance walking path, not actual track, but long-distance kind of marked walking path in the UK, which is nice. I've walked bits of it. I've never done the whole thing, actually. I shouldn't I? And the other thing is, so that's the Pennine Way. That's one way to measure. I'm talking about ways to measure what crossing the Pennines actually is. So some people suggested using the Pennine Way. The kind of thing is, the Pennine Way is a bit arbitrary. Sarah points out that the Pennines are what separates Manchester from civilization. Yeah, that is true. Interesting, no representatives east or west of the Pennines on Grant Shapps' new panel. Interesting. That's Lord Orc pointing that out. Let's see. I've spent... Oh, if you're curious in how many hours I've spent in City Skylines, I don't really want to talk about it, but it's in excess of 800 hours, so that's not healthy. Nope. Anyway, the other thing. So, Pennine Way, and then the east-west watershed. So this is a much more scientific measure of what crossing the Pennines actually means. And from my perspective, I'm talking about right the way to the top of the Pennines down to the south, by the way. So I'm not just talking about the little bit between Manchester and Leeds. Sorry for everyone who's sort of just been talking about that little pocket. I'm talking about the whole thing. Because actually, there aren't many crossings at all of that whole stretch. This is the east-west watershed. What I mean by watershed, or what is meant by watershed, is that on one side of it, everything drains in one direction, and on the other side of it, everything drains in the other direction. For the mainland Britain, as part of this weird archipelago that we live in, or I live in, and a few of you live in, that means draining into the North Sea or draining into the Irish Sea for the Pennines, or into the Atlantic. So everything on this map that you're looking at, everything to the left, so to the west, drains into the Irish Sea, and everything to the right drains eastwards down into the North Sea. And that, for me, is my threshold. So here we are. There's both the Pennine Way and the east-west watershed, and you can see they do follow each other fairly closely. So that means that you're on top of kind of almost following ridges all the way along. Not necessarily the highest point. It kind of depends what's draining where, but it's quite nice. And actually, it's quite an interesting walk. It's an alternative walk to the Pennine Way, is to follow the east-west watershed. It's quite an interesting route. I've used that as a way to pick routes out when doing few walks in the Dales. Anyway, I digress as ever. Who's saying things? How long am I? Well, we're here until 8, by the way. This is normally lasts until 8. I try and snip it off before it reaches the hour mark, because more than an hour is it's unhealthy for you and me and everyone. Right, I digress. So, Pennine Way, there you see in orange, and the east-west watershed, there you see in sort of light blue. I don't know how clear that is. Hopefully it's fairly clear. Seems to be coming up all right. Actually, I don't give a stuff about the Pennine Way, because it's... Oh, wait, let's not do that yet. Yeah, I don't give a stuff about the Pennine Way. But anyway, just for getting your bearings, the two stations at the extreme ends, essentially the Pennines run from Stoke in the south to Berwick in the north. That's kind of the distance they run. I think that's the nearest railway stations to each end of the... Actually, see, the Pennine Way runs a bit... stops a bit short of that, but the Pennines do continue a little bit further. If you look at sort of the topography and look at the geology, it actually does continue a little bit further than the end of the Pennine Way. So I'm going to ignore the Pennine Way. We're just looking at the watershed, because for me that's an actual scientific measure of east and west. And I might not have got the watershed perfectly right, because I did this fairly quickly, having downloaded an OS data set of waterways, and did this in a panic, because I thought there'd be someone would have drawn an east-west watershed in a KML file, a Google Earth file, for download. Nope, apparently not. So there's a gap in the market for anyone who wants to send me that information. Anyway, right, so our criteria, these are our criteria for the rail lines that I'm going to consider in this little chat. Number one, the railway must cross the east-west watershed. Number one. Number two, the railway must connect into the east and west coast rail networks. So it can't just cross the watershed and then reach the buffer stops 3 miles beyond it. No, it has to be a proper crossing of the Pennines to count in this completely arbitrary hour-long programme about railways. So leaving that up, put in some guesses. So I want to see some guesses. Pop down some numbers. So what do you reckon? There'll be people now. Lee particularly is going to nail it, I'm sure. Sarah probably will as well. The two of you. David, if David's still on the call, David, surely you can give me the right number. If I trace up, I wonder how many, if anyone else has guessed. Harvey Ellis Williams, hi. Welcome. I hope this is what you expect it to be. It's substantially less professional than Well, There's Your Problem, which is saying something. I'm sure you'll agree. Let's have a look. Oh, the Little Northwestern's got a mention from Lee there. Nice. Good. I want to see some digits. Go and start typing numbers. Let's have a cup of tea. Sip of the tea. Right, we've got 10. Matt's saying 10. That's the first guess. 7. Michael has literally no clue. And arguably, he probably doesn't care either. He came here to find out. That's fair enough, Michael. That is sort of the premise of this whole thing. 7 or 8. 8. Oh, there's some guesses. There's 8 or 1. No, there's not a trick question. There are quite a few. Don't worry. This isn't going to be like, actually, none of them did. There's don't worry. Nothing like that. Lots of people. 6. Okay. The Right Honourable David Frankel MP suggests 6. Probably one in Derbyshire. 12. Simon Fisher says 12. Buxton doesn't count. Interesting, Sarah. Interesting. I think there's going to be rage by the end of this, isn't there? Lord Orc suggests 42. Well, if in doubt. Right, okay. So we've had quite a few suggestions. The highest so far... Okay, I'm going to ignore 42. The highest so far is 12. The lowest is 6. Michael Batman reckons it must be at least 12, probably more. Okay, right, let's have a look, shall we? Oh, actually, while that's up there, you keep chucking your suggestions in. I'm going to quickly check Twitter to see who's here and who's doing which. Let's have a look. So, quite a few people coming to say hello. Absolute pleasure to see you. Good stuff. Yeah, nice. Always worth checking Twitter, because sometimes people type questions on there and it's nice to answer them. David Shearers reckons 6. So if the lowest number we've had is 6, the highest is 12. Matt Reed concurs that the answer is generally always 42. Martin Haynes is saying 7. Oh, quite a few there. Okay, right. I'm going to unleash rage upon myself, aren't I? Right, let's get started. So, here we are. There's that watershed. I've in the background there, you can see I've put through all the existing railway lines, so you can start counting those to realise whether you're right or wrong. I'm including in that number former railways, by the way, just in case you didn't realise. There's 9 from Peter Tipple. Okay, they're still coming through. So, to start with, the Border Union Railway, which is the proper name for the Waverley route, is too far north. Just in case you thought that one was going to be involved, it just skirts the top of the Pennines within the Scottish border, so it doesn't count. So that one's off the list, just in case you were wondering. So let's start. I think I'm about to throw up... oh yeah, there we go. So it's 1830. 0 railway lines are open over the Pennines at this point. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Possibly one in Derbyshire. Sarah, your guess of 7 is... that's what you're sticking with. Cool. Everyone's going through there. Nice. Yeah, sorry, Lee. I'm including the closed routes. But you get to pat yourselves on the back if you've got the open routes right, because there'll be a ticker for both of them, so it's fine. So, where are we? 1830. Railways are a bit of a thing. So in 1830, what's been opened. So we've got the Stockton Darlington. We've got work has started on the Liverpool Manchester. We've got work will actually have started on the Great Western, has it, or did it start? Oh no, that was a little bit later, wasn't it? What else? Quite a few lines. So things have started happening. In any case, in 1831 we have our first railway across the Pennines, and it's the Cromford and High Peak Railway. 1831. There it is. Number one. I should have got a ping noise in this, shouldn't I? Maybe I'll add one in post. So that's number one, the Cromford and High Peak Railway. And to be honest, there's not. It's not. I don't know. Personally don't know much about this railway. It was. There's me typing, just in case. Throw me your Cromford and High Peak Railway facts. This is an interactive thing. We need to learn from each other. But essentially, it was a railway. It ended up having actual trains moving back and forth on it. I think it was a bit of a light railway. It didn't carry much. Let's have a look. So we've still got lots of suggestions. Very good point. Yeah, my face is covering things up. That's a good point. Let's get rid of my face. You don't need it. Let's get rid of that. I could move it, couldn't I? Shall I do that? Let's move it over here. Yeah, there we go. How's that? Is that better? You don't need the north arrow, do you? It is, yeah. Let's. This is the one with the. It's what's it called? It's something Gotham Curve. It's got Gotham Curve on it. Yeah. Oh, they are. I moved my face. Right. Yeah, it's got horrendous. It included haulage. Yeah, so it had some inclines. It had a curve that is just absolutely obscenely tight. I don't understand what they came up with. It's just doolally. But it was a passage. It was the first railway to cross. The next railway, we have to go forwards to 1837. So it takes another 6 years for the next railway to appear, which is the Newcastle and Carlisle Railway. It's a lovely railway. It goes back and forth still to this day, which is quite nice. I travel on it a fair amount. And I think it's the first proper heavy rail crossing of the Pennines. Quite a distance away, and obviously satisfying quite different markets. The Cromford and High Peak connected Barbados and Manchester, whereas the let's have a look. And whereas the Newcastle and Carlisle, funnily enough, connected up Newcastle and Carlisle. So 1837, that one appeared. It had obviously been opened in stages. Gary, don't worry about being late. That's absolutely fine. It's Gotham. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, lovely. Gotham. Is it really Gotham? Is that, or is that? Is it not Gotham? Gotham. Crikey. Britain's a weird place. We pronounce things strangely. Right, 1841. Let's crack on, because it's already 7:22. In 1841, the Manchester and Leeds Railway opened. So this is what is now called the Calder Valley Line, and was gobbled up fairly rapidly by consumed by the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway. Let's have a look. People are confused by not knowing which way north is. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So 4 years later, the Sheffield, Ashton-under-Lyne and Manchester Railway opened. The Great Central, as this would end up being called, loved huge long names. Sarah's asking which places I've added Bados names to. Scarbados, Darbados. I think that's the only two, really. Just, I can't think of any others. Send me your suggestions on a postcard. Right. Through Batley, yep. So Sheffield, Ashton-under-Lyne and Manchester Railway, that was 1845, so that's pretty early on. You can see we're starting to get quite a few up here. 1848, so that's only 3 years later, the Leeds and Bradford Extension Railway opened, in bits actually, so this isn't perfect, and it's not an obvious representation of exactly what's opening when. And this is what is now includes the closed section of the Skipton Colne Railway, or that bit. So that bit. Next, okay, so 1849, so we're getting a kind of a surge in railways appearing here. We're kind of just over the curve of railway mania at this point. Two new railways open. One, if it's in italics, that's because I couldn't really find exactly what the name of the... So this was the North Staffordshire Railway, I think. Is that right? That actually opened it, and I couldn't find what they called it officially, but now it's called... I think possibly it was just the Churnet Valley line. But anyway, so they opened the Churnet Valley, what is now called the Churnet Valley Railway. Hint, hint, to Heritage Line. So it was doomed. And the Huddersfield and Manchester Railway, what is now the Huddersfield line, opened. So back in 1841, the Manchester and Leeds Railway had opened through Summit Tunnel. 1849, you got this first stand-edged railway tunnel. Of course, the canal tunnel had been there already from the Huddersfield Narrow Canal, but the Huddersfield, so the stand-edged tunnel was opened, and you had the Huddersfield-Manchester Railway, which provided that another link between Leeds and Manchester. So where are we? 1849. So that was quite a bit of a surge. So we're up to 7. So any of you who suggested 6, you've been bust, I'm afraid. South Durham and Lancashire Union Railway. 1861. So we had a bit of a wait there. So Railway Mania, the bubble had burst. Hudson had been, decried as a charlatan and thrown in a debtor's prison or whatever it is he got up to. The rich never really suffer, do they? Anyway, South Durham and Lancashire Union Railway, which is, what was it called? Basically, it connects Penrith over to Bishop Auckland. So it's quite a nice bit of railway. And if you look at the map, you can see actually it's quite a useful strategic connection. And would be today. Hint, hint as to its doom. Right. Lewis is unhappy about Barbados. He doesn't like it. David Shearers points out that miners digging Standedge Tunnel had to pay for their own candles, which is, Stanage. I know it's Stanage. Thanks, Chrissy, for correcting my pronunciation. Michael's prediction is starting to look unrealistic. I don't know. Yeah, Cas Vegas. Yeah, I love it. You've got to call these things Monster Trail, Peak District, which is accessible to an extent. Yeah, that's Lord Orc asking that. Sarah's asking, yes, cell wrap. It will fix everything wrong with the railways. You can support cell wrap, but it won't fix everything that's wrong with the railways. Sarah's pointing out it's only the Calder Valley to Cooper Bridge. Pretty sure from there it's called the Huddersfield to Kirkgate line through somewhere south of Leeds. Yeah, that is right, Sarah. You're right. But generally, the bit that goes over the Pennines, we're going to call the Calder Valley line, and it's kind of a useful name for the whole thing because it's a bit of a mess around there, as you can see already from the mesh of railways that are appearing everywhere. Let's see what else. Simon Fisher points out that Gotham City, off of Batman, was named after the village of what Sarah suggested might have been Gotham, but we'll see. Let's see. That's good fact, David. Thanks for that. Let's have a look. Everyone's going, oh, we're talking about just open lines. Nah. All railway lines. I had to pull the wool over your eyes in some way. Sam Evans can confirm Barbados is an industry term. He is very upset, but it can't be ignored. David Shearers pointed out that candles were apparently 3 to 5% of the cost of the tunnel. Good grief. That's massive. Absolutely massive. Yeah, Sarah is pointing out Slowett. I actually do know Slowett. I'm fine with that, so we're good. And also I can pronounce East Coast Scottish names, which David will know are often a bit loopy. Let's have a look. David Frankel started uni in Durham and has got friends in Lancaster. That South Durham and Lancashire Union Railway would have come really handy. Yeah. Kerrigate. Yeah, there we are. Right. Thanks, Chrissy. Anyway, right. So that's a useful bit of railway. We've got another bit appearing. So here we are. The Manchester, Buxton, Matlock and Midland Junction Railway opened another thing to parallel the High Peak line. And they did, so Buxton started becoming this kind of bizarre railway junction metropolis. Very weird. That was 1863, so we're pushing on a bit now. What happened in 1863? Canada? No, that was 1867, wasn't it? And we pushed beyond that. So, 1876, we get... Okay, so I've had to use some artistic license here. So basically a bit of railway that includes the Settle Carlisle and the Leeds Morecambe line. Now, technically this is 2, but I'm only going to count it as 1 because the Settle Carlisle line crosses the watershed, but on its own, it doesn't link up the East and West railway networks. So I'm only counting the Settle Carlisle and Leeds Morecambe lines, which is what they're called now rather than what they were originally called. I'm only counting it as one, okay, because I made these rules. Yes. So they're this was built. Obviously, the Settle Carlisle was built by the Midland Midland Railway in 1876. But the other bits of the Leeds Morecambe line were part of the little London North Western Railway, and a few other bits, I think, opened by other smaller companies as well, and then were gobbled up. But they alone didn't cross. So I'm only counting this as 1876 when the whole lot suddenly became or satisfied my criteria. Sarah's laughing at Buxton as a weird rail hub. That is the point of Crewe, but Crewe kind of makes sense-ish, does it? Looking at it in the map down here, Crewe does look a bit weird, doesn't it, on its own down there? You can tell because it's got the two lines coming in like that, and then the straight line of the West Coast Main Line straight through. Yeah, very strange. Anyway, right, 1878. So we're getting quite late now. This is quite late on in the world of railways. 1878 for the UK is quite late, and this is when the Wensleydale was built. Or rather, this was when the last bit of the Wensleydale was built, when it was connected between Hawes and Garsdale. So the Midland built their connection off the Settle Carlisle, which had only opened 2 years before, remember, built their connection off the Settle Carlisle to join up to the North East Railways, Northallerton to Redmire Railway. Actually, Northallerton to Hawes, and then Hawes-Garsdale was built by the Midland, I think. People need to double check that for me. And so I'm just pointing out there's some terrific facts kind of getting churned out in the chat here. Stanage Tunnel hosted one of the first water troughs due to the fact that it was flat. That's from Simon Fisher. Oh, I bet that was really good for the brickwork. Nice. So the Wensleydale Railway opened in 1878. And actually they're still having... I used to do track walks for the Wensleydale. And having walked that line quite a lot, I can tell you that there are bits of permanent way stuff that are about that age. I think the oldest I found was maybe 18. I think I did find an 1880 base plate. So perhaps it was after it had been. So this is potentially where they'd built the first bit, or the Midland had built their bit, and the North East Railway thought, well, we're getting a lot more traffic on it, so maybe we need to put new track materials down. That's my guess as to why they renewed it. So there's a load of renewal that clearly happened then, and then it hasn't been touched since. So British Rail were running on that material until it was, the line was passed over to the Heritage Line. And a lot of those base plates, the old base plates, are still in situ because there's some lighter sort of double-headed rail, not bullhead. Bullhead has a different size top and bottom. It's got double-headed rail, which is what is it, £80? I think it's 80, or it might be 90. I think it might be 9. Yeah, anyway, it's light. It might be £80. Anyway, it is a nice heritage railway, and I do miss walking along it. Actually, I used to do track walks, but various things got in the way, such as the fact that I couldn't commit my time to it as much as it needed. It is also Wallace's favourite cheese. So Hawes fact, which isn't on the Wensleydale Railway anymore, but you can sort of get the bus from the end of it. Go to the once we've all got the virus and it's blown over. Stay safe, everyone. Genuinely, wash your hands, stay indoors, remain indoors. Go to Hawes and go to the Wensleydale factory because they have a cheese fridge that's the size of a large garage or a small business unit, and you go in and there are 40 cheeses and they're all free, and you can just go round and round and eat the cheese, and then they know they've got you because you will come out of there having bought cheese, so they know they've got you. But it's sensational. I would recommend that. That's my of this whole video. The one takeaway is to visit Hawes, go and have the cheese. It's not all Wensleydale. There's like Kit Calvert, which is a sort of like a cheddar, but it's Wensleydale-y. There's loads of different ones. There's the fruit one, of course, but there's the pure, like just the straight Wensleydale. There's every manner of cheese. There's ones with like spicy stuff. It's good. It's good. Would recommend that highly. Everyone's gone quiet. They're like, this cheese thing. Everyone's Googling it right now, like how to get there. Bye, Matt. Pleasure. This will be on. This uploads onto YouTube later. Dip in, dip out. We're all friends here. Buxton was useful thanks to the springs for water supplies plus tourism around Matlock. That's from Simon Fisher pointed out. Yeah, Buxton. It was a spring, wasn't it? So the Victorians loved that sort of thing. The salubrious air, as Pertilla would put it. Right, we've got stuck in 1878. So let's hop forwards to 1894, and a particularly tricky bit of railway appears. because it's all tunnel. I think it was like a quarter of it is in tunnel. Is that right? Or maybe even more. It's a huge length of this railway is in tunnel. It's the Doran-Chinley Railway, what is now called the Hope Valley Line. So that's only 1894, so that's super late. So we're up to 12 lines. Are there any more? Oh, no, that's it. And indeed, up to 1958, that's how many lines there were across the Pennines, 12. And it actually makes sense, as you go further north, there are fewer lines, and then the density around connecting, you can see they're all connecting across from Sheffield and Leeds into Manchester. Manchester very much is the hub there. Leeds, and yes, lots of things happened in Leeds and Sheffield, but actually Manchester was the major port. So you can see everything feeding over into Manchester so that it can get out towards the Americas and indeed out to everywhere else that the British Empire had colonised and committed genocide in. So that's up to 1958. So far, so good. Although I've just added, you might have noticed, I've just added a closed counter at the bottom there, which is the bad news bit. Is that the Fridge Boris bit in? Yeah, I think so, yeah. Buxton Water. It still is a spring. Yep, Buxton is a thing. Garstang Blue is good. Ooh, Garstang Blue, Lord Orc, yes. Cheese Chat. We could maybe, there could be like a spin-off, like Railway Cheese. In fact, maybe there needs to be a Railway Cheese episode. In fact, that's exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be a Railway Cheese episode. It's a thing. There we go. Just thought I'd add that for y'all. Right, so let's just whiz over here. Where are we at? So far so good. We've got 12 railways, none of them closed. It's 1958, and everyone's happy. You've got lots of railways, everything's fine. Modernisation has been a complete success. The railways are in a fantastic state financially. Politically, there's a lot of energy behind railways. The whole general public thinks railways are the future. So we're in a really good place. Yeah. No. So 1959, we have our first loss. And it's actually one of the later railways that opened. Garsdale to Hawes gets closed, and therefore this line, which is the Wensleydale Railway, gets discounted from... The whole thing isn't closed, but this line now is discounted, so it falls foul of our criteria, 1 and 2. So it's gone. So then that was 1959, pre-beaching, I'll point out. 1962, we lose the Barnard Castle, the sectional line between Barnard Castle and Bishop Auckland, and so we lose that, frankly, very useful connection across from Penrith to Teesside and to Darlington and connecting across. An incredibly useful line for freight. In fact, both of these two would have been both the Wensleydale and the Barnard, kind of that line, Penrith to Darlington, would be unbelievably useful for getting skipping freight across in either direction. Not least, from, like, for example, Teesport across, using some capacity on the West Coast Main Line, granted, but there are ways of you can use the Settle Carlisle and then come across. Just lots of useful things could be done with that. It's now closed, which is really, really daft. So next, 1963, the Cromford and High Peak Railway, it buys it. So we've lost 3 railways by 1963. Beaching starts biting at this point, and we then lose the Churnet Valley Line. That becomes a bit of it becomes a heritage railway. So that's 1964. 4 years later, we lose Matlock to Buxton as a crossing of the Pennines. So we're on 5 lost already. So that's, what was that, 10 years? Yeah, 10 years, and we lose 5 lines. Not good. Skipton Colne, as everyone knows, is gone. Cell-wrap, power to you. Get it reopened. Won't solve anything, but, I don't think that's a reason not to reopen it. There we go, yeah. Picklebridge and Queensberry are local examples of cheeses. Nice. Sarah points out there's a lot of stuff that closed pre-beaching that we just lump in with beaching in common parlance. Yeah, it's true. It is true. And it happens all the time. Beaching is a kind of a bad word. It's like a swear word, isn't it, in the railways? But the reality is that he was doing a job, and he was doing a job with pretty shoddy data. They did their best to collect it, and yes, there were lots of cases where they picked up data on stupid days, but there was a lot of local politics at play. And indeed, when there were large campaigns, some of the beaching decisions were overturned fairly quickly. So we're at 1970 now, And actually, at this point, the appetite for rail closures is dissipating substantially. Already, beaching was everyone involved spent, so both Conservatives at the time and then Castle with the Labour government afterwards, spent quite a lot of political capital closing these railway lines. Oh, sorry, Sarah, you're not talking about cheese, you're talking about railway lines. Well, what is this, a railway chat? And it takes until 1981 when the last of our lines closes, which everyone goes on about a lot. It's Woodhead. So we've lost 7 lines and we've only got 5 open. That's 1981. So by 1982, 7 lines are gone. Woodhead's gone. Woodhead had already been wound down. It had been carrying a lot of steel and coal traffic without any passenger kind of traffic going over it. Part of the reason for, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, let's whiz back to Woodhead. Part of the reason for Woodhead's closure was because passenger trains had been diverted, but actually they'd been diverted away from Manchester Victoria, and into Piccadilly. This seemed useful because it avoided people having to cross Manchester. It felt like a no-brainer. There weren't that many trains running, certainly not compared to now. So actually, it was easier for people's journeys. So in doing that, it meant that you didn't need to go over Woodhead, and there weren't that many stations, and the ridership over Woodhead was not huge. It was quite a rural line. It covered less population than Hope. And the bits that did cover population, the urban bits, are still open today. And in Manchester, that might get gobbled into Metrolink fairly soon. Let's have a look. Oh, lots of people are piping up now. Oh, crikey. We're talking about cheese again, but this time we're talking about Swiss cheese. Sarah's pointing out that the problem with getting from Huddersfield to Bradford via rail is there's a lot of disused mine work, so the land is Swiss cheese, and this is what caused Low Moor reopening to be delayed. Yeah, I've done quite a bit of work around Leeds, and yeah, mine workings are a real challenge. Things like new stations. We were looking at a new station in an unnamed place on some reverse curves east of Leeds, Norforth, and we're looking at a new station there. And good grief, the mine workings is a challenge. It is a challenge. Right. Oh crikey, here we go. So, Beeching, Pick and Bridge, Queensbury are not cheeses; they're railways. Lee points out that the good doctor came along. Oh, Sarah, both closing. Yep. They're being massacred. Michael's pointing out that these railways are being massacred. Yep, it's true. Queensbury has a lot of hot air around it at the moment, with some inventions which, as we know, is bizarre and counterproductive to the aim to reopen as a cycle route. Lots of... Oh, Martin points out Matlock Buxton closed partly as a result of the wires on the West Coast Main Line reaching Manchester. Interesting. Because it just removed the need. They could put all the expresses that used to go up Midland onto the West Coast. This is what happened when we didn't have all these decisions, political decisions on closing railways were being made at a time when we had declining ridership, or at least, that's not true actually, per capita we didn't have declining ridership at any point. But we did have, what we did have was not nearly as many trains as we have now. So it was all about rationalisation and being clever with what we had, and because government was spending pennies on the railway. Low Moor cost 10 million to rebuild. Yep, very expensive. David Shearers says, don't knock Beeching before his closures. A third of the network carried only 1% of traffic. Yeah, in fact, Dr. David Turner, my very good friend and a brilliant railway historian, Dr. David Turner, wrote a really good thread about Beeching. Search Dr. David Turner Beeching in Twitter and you'll find it. It goes into great detail about the fact that Beeching was held up as a pariah, but actually the political context, the wider social context, everyone thought cars were the future, You were weird if you suggested just leaving them open for no reason. Some people had the foresight to look ahead, and lots of the campaigners did as well, but a lot of people kept wanting the railways open for just nostalgic reasons as well. So there was just most people just thought the railways were the fact of the past. Fool them. Let's have a look. Simon's talking about Woodhead suffering from subsidence. Yes, Sheffield. You're right. Well, no. Yes, you're right. Martin's right. I mean, Sheffield, Victoria Midland, not Manchester. There was rationalisation going on at Piccadilly and Victoria, but I think I'm getting confused with my Denton bypass. Yes, good point. Right. Where are we? Woodhead's gone. It was carrying steel and coal, and then the Selby coalfield opened, or was proposed to open, and that decimated the last of the coal traffic, and it just couldn't justify it being open anymore. Replacing the DC overheads was claimed as one reason for its closure, but to be honest, it was just it didn't make sense to keep open. At the time, hindsight's a wonderful thing. So, yeah, David's right. Beach Train introduced intercity and container trains, both things that we wouldn't, the railway would be totally different now without them. Very true. Thanks, David. Very good point. I'm erring a lot. Apologies. So 1982, we've lost 7 lines. We still have 5 open. Just look at that. Decimated. And the biggest gap for me isn't necessarily around, everyone goes on about Woodhead. It's not, yes, because that's the major urban connection, but actually it's from a strategic perspective. You've lost those connections further north that are incredibly useful for strategic, for diversion routes, for freight, particularly strategic freight. Seriously short-sighted on that front. Connecting people across, for people from Teesside and people from Teesside getting across to the Lake District now is an absolute nightmare on the train. Or certainly it takes a lot longer than it would if there was a direct connection. But freight for me is the main thing. Right, so that was 1982, and nothing has changed, and it's now 2020, and everything still looks exactly the same, which is a bit rubbish, to be honest. Right, David, you'll like this. So what have we got? David will correct me horribly on this as well. Mr. Shearers will correct. The real villain was really Marples. Yep, he was kind of shamed after all this. The man was bent as a 9-bob note. Yep. DC overhead structures still being used today. Yes, they are, Simon. That's Woodhead related. Oh, we're bouncing around. Yeah, everyone hates Marples, and rightfully so. Right, 2020. I'm waffling. 1945. We've only got a quarter of an hour left. Right, what was I going to say next? Oh yeah, Scotland, the Scottish Central Belt. So I'm going to use the Scottish Central Belt as an example of connectivity between two major urban hubs, or rather 2 major urban centres. Actually, the Scottish Central Belt behaves like a single... Wait a minute. This requires gesticulation, and therefore my entire face. Hello, everyone. So, the Scottish Central Belt. You've got... let's do this for you guys. You've got Glasgow, you've got Edinburgh, and the whole lot behaves as one urban hub. So rather than they're not 2 separate cities pulling away from each other, they behave as one urban hub, and as a result, the economy of that region is thriving. Really good things are happening in the Scottish Central Belt, despite lots of external factors. And the main reason for that is, arguably the main reason for that is because it's very, very well connected. Lots of transport links, not just rail, but rail is very good, which is what I'm about to talk about, because if I was back to putting my face on screen, this is a list of the railways that connect. So bear in mind we had 12 railways across the whole of the Pennines. In Scotland, and the terrain is admittedly much more straightforward, but you had 7 railway lines. So let's get the live chat back up. Everyone's talking about how bent Marples was in terms of corrupt. He was a very corrupt man. Nasty piece of work. Here we are. Oh, crikey, I'm bouncing around. So everyone can see this. Good, right. I'm back. So the Kelvin Valley Railway, that was the one at the top. The Edinburgh-Glasgow is the main Falkirk High Line. The Northern Caledonian is... where did it connect up through? It was... it's the Cumbernauld Line, I think. The Slamanan Railway, and I might have pronounced that wrong, that's gone, actually. Let's just make that point. Yep, David's absolutely right. There are 5 now. So the Kelvin Valley Railway closed in 1966, and the Slamanan Railway closed back in 1930. It was kind of a light railway for quite specific industrial purposes, serving lots of mines. And a lot of it's been undermined by kind of mine working in the Central Belt. But you've got and the Bathgate and Coatbridge Railway, which closed, was reopened in 2010. They reopened a railway. That's a good idea, isn't it? So there you are. So you've got 5 lines that remain open between 2 cities, compared to, say, between Leeds and Manchester, really relying on 2 main lines, which is rubbish. Not only that, but Scotland has electrified every single one of them. Every single railway line between Edinburgh and Glasgow is electrified. The fact that so there we are. Of the 5 open railways between Glasgow and Edinburgh, 5 of them are also wired. So there we go. Let's go back to the Pennines again. So bearing in mind, Scotland, 5 railways open. They closed 2 of them, which, when you look at a map, kind of makes sense. 5 wired. Got 5 railways open and the whole of the Pennines, and how many of them are wired? 0. How many should be wired? Well, yeah, that's it. 0. 0 lines wired. How many lines ought to be wired by, let's say, I don't know, an arbitrary number, 2040? The reality is every single one of the trans-Pennine routes needs to have wires across it. They're all strategic routes. The Newcastle-Carlisle line is used regularly as a diversion route. It should be wired. It's actually quite, it's connecting 2 major centres. It has reasonable, it also carries freight. That's a line that should be wired. And it's like, oh, but it's a little rural line. No, wire it. David, I'd be interested to see which one whether the Newcastle-Carlisle made it onto your little map, but frankly, it ought to be wired. Settle-Carlisle is an absolute no-brainer. There's lots of people saying 0. Yes, indeed. Yes, it is a very new state of affairs regarding OLE, but it has happened. As Simon Fisher saying, it has. But, yep. UCANuber0157 says electrify all the things. Absolutely. All of those should be wired. The reason I picked 2040 is because that's probably also, bearing in mind, what is it, 10-2. 2040 is also the year where we should have a new crossing of the Pennines in the form of High Speed 3, which is what I call it because I hate NPR as a name. It's a gimmick name made up by George Osborne. But NPR will be a new crossing. And it should be wired. Well, it will be wired. If it isn't, no, it will be wired. East West Rail is now thankfully coming to their senses and realising they should have electrified it up from the off. David Shearers is saying, much as he thinks that Scotland is great, to be fair, there's only one railway tunnel between Edinburgh and Glasgow. Yeah, it's true. It is true. Carlisle, Newcastle and Settle Carlisle on the electrification map. Thanks, David. I thought they would be. They're just strategic. They're major strategic connection, particularly the Newcastle Carlisle, which is the only connection over the Pennines between the central belt and and right the way down to the Calder Valley line. It's ridiculous. That's a major strategic connection, which further highlights how silly it is that those both the Waverley and the Wensleydale lines connections were closed. Right, okay, I'm going to zoom in on the bit of the Pennines that people often do just think about. So here is a map of those key crossings between Sheffield, Manchester and Leeds. So you've got the Calder Valley line, the Huddersfield line, the Old Woodhead route and the Hope Valley. And the reason I put this up is to kind of show you what's going to be happening by 2040. People are going, bring back Third Rail. Cameron, no. Gary, could you explain why they should be wired? Gary, so electrification, David has written an excellent piece on this, but electrification is gives you by far the cheapest railway to run once it's up. It is substantially more reliable than diesel. That's even including for dewirements. I think it's 3 to 5. An electric railway with an OLE is 3 to 5 times more reliable than a diesel one. Diesel trains are heavy. They're polluting. They vibrate. They're not comfortable. They're heavier, so they wreck the track. They have lots of moving parts. They require fuel that needs. They're messy. They're not as clean. Electric trains are clean. Fewer moving parts, cheaper to run, cheaper to maintain. They also allow, because the trains are lighter, they can accelerate more and more powerful. They can accelerate more quickly, which means you can fit more trains on the same length of track. Lots and lots and lots of reasons for electrification. And in fact, David's written excellent pieces on this in Rail Engineer. You can look up this stuff at length. Gary Keener is someone to look up on Twitter if you want to learn a bit more about how OLE kind of goes up and why it looks like the way it does. David does a lot of work on decarbonisation for Rail Engineer when he's editing Rail Engineer, and so there's lots of good stuff there as well. Oh, crikey, 5 minutes to go. So, right. You can still all hear me, I presume. This thing's still working. Yeah, you can still hear me. Good. Lovely. Right, here we go. Lots of new lines have just appeared. Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield. In 2040, this is what the map will look like. So you'll have, and this is probably, not definitely, but very probably what the route of High Speed 3 will take as well. So you can see you've got High Speed 2 shooting up, kind of going past Manchester as it connects up to the West Coast Main Line. That needs more high-speed segregation up towards Glasgow, incidentally, but we'll wait for that. And then you can see the leg, the kind of the kink going round, dodging George Osborne's constituency and arriving into Manchester. That's kind of so it can serve the airport. It's not quite as crazy a shape as it kind of appears to be, and it allows the right approach into Manchester as well. There are sort of vaguely sensible engineering reasons for that weird shape, frustrating as it might look. And I think the most likely route for NPR is now that they will use that leg. In fact, very definitely, because the passive provision within the designs for HS2 include this. It will go down, it'll cross, and then it'll head off towards Liverpool, and that'll be the connection for the HS2 trains going towards Liverpool as well, will be at this junction where HS3 crosses HS2. You have this weird curve where you've got the platform kind of curves round, and then that's where you get the route of NPR going up over the Pennines, probably with substantial tunnelling, up with a station sort of south of Bradford, probably, but not definitely. But I think it's very likely to happen. And then it weaves up into Leeds. That is the route. Does anyone have any? Has anyone seen that route yet? I don't know to what extent it's. This is me having. I can't remember, to be honest, but this is very likely to be what the final route will be. That's a kind of a permanent rail engineering route and alignment, but I think it's very close to. Yes, it is. Sarah points out that the HS3 is going along the M62 near Halifax. Yeah, it does follow the M62 for a lot of its route. It just makes sense to do that, doesn't it? It's fairly straight. Obviously, it kind of kinks away. There are a couple of bits. In fact, you can see the main kink, the kink that's sort of next to Halifax, is where the M62 kind of has a squared off curve, and obviously the railway, to keep its speed, it needs to have nice, flat, continuous curves. Yeah, and then into Leeds it goes. And then you can see HS2 on the other side. There's an upgrade. The line that's the most tenuous there is the connection between Sheffield and HS2. They haven't really published what's going on there. In order to satisfy a decent timetable for whatever the future Northern Paris rail network will do, they need to do high-speed segregation continues to apply. If you don't kind of undertake high-speed segregation on the line connecting Sheffield and HS2, you'll just have exactly the same problems that we have now. And Sheffield, in my eyes, is a bit of a sticking point from that perspective for HS2. I know why it went that way. Local politics and an easy win in terms of cost meant that Sheffield got bumped off the route. But I'd have preferred the Meadowhall station, to be honest, because that would have served Doncaster better as well. But c'est la vie. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Bringing HS3 into Bradford Central is a daft idea. It means the new line has to do the same practice as conventional trains, reversing that city. No, it wouldn't do that, Lee. It would come in as a tunnel. But I think they're going to do like a parkway station and sort of satisfy it that way. I think there are lots of ideas. Northern have inputted a lot into what they think is a good idea in terms of operation. But Bradford is sort of there's quite a lot to think about there. Right, what else have I got on these slides? It's going to be late. Right, Woodhead. If you're going to reopen Woodhead, this is what I'm going to end on. If you're going to reopen Woodhead, you wouldn't open it on the same route because you can't reuse the route. And this is going to be another episode in the future, so I'm not going to go into much detail. But if you were going to reopen Woodhead, it would be pretty much a new alignment right the way through. But we'll have to save that for when we do a Woodhead. Sarah agrees that we should have stuck with Meadowhall. Agreed. Manchester Sheffield always feels slow, but always strikes me as mad that you can't go Manchester, Derby, Leicester directly. Is there a solution? There will be, yeah. Which will be that's Michael Peter asked that. HS2, go from Manchester HS2 down, change at either interchange, change at interchange, or go into Curzon Street, and then from Curzon Street go out and up to East Midlands Hub. Because it's so fast, the fact that you're changing, the trains are so frequent, that'll be a far quicker journey than it is now. Yes. Right. Let's have a look. It's noticeable that there's no improvement between Manchester and Sheffield. Yeah, that's because of all sorts of reasons. But part of it is that if you... that was Michael Batman who asked that. Partly it's because if you want to get the train between Sheffield and Manchester quickly, it's probably going to be quicker to take HS2 and then HS3 across and not necessarily upgrade. But there are plans for a new trans-Pennine tunnel, and at the moment they're talking about a motorway. That needs to be scrapped off the bat. That does not... I'm sorry, leave the road as rubbish, because then you incentivise people to actually use rail. Invest in a rail tunnel between Sheffield and Manchester. So this is why Woodhead reopening is stupid. Don't reopen Woodhead. Tunnel a new direct connection between Sheffield and Manchester. That's what to do. Forget Woodhead. Just because it was a bad idea that it was closed doesn't mean it's a good idea to reopen it again. But next episode. Right. Yeah, Bradford. That's another episode as well. Right. Yeah, okay, that was the end of that. We're 30 seconds left. I'm definitely to bust the hour, aren't I? Make your theme requests for next time. I'm not. I'm gonna. We'll keep going, and you can keep suggesting things. Not all of them are going to be. You guys get to democratically decide. I'm going to, partly because it requires effort for me to kind of create things from scratch. It's useful for me to use old threads and chuck stuff on the screen. Plus, I hopefully will be lining up some guests, which should be exciting. If you want to be a guest, if you want to join, let's go for it. Skype is all we need, and we can connect with Skype. So if you have a particular expertise or a railway story that you want to tell, yeah, pop me a message. Tweet me or pop a message under this video. But most of all, make your theme requests for what the next one's going to be. As ever, if you like this or you didn't like this, tough, then do pop me a coffee. This tea has got cold, so I need another coffee. Cold, overly strong tea. Thanks for that. Yeah, just send me a coffee. Oh, and yeah, this one, well, I did all the diagrams myself, so that was quite easy. But thanks everyone for joining. Let's go back to here and bring up my face because I can. Oh, it's got dark outside as well. Ooh. Hello everyone, and oh no, goodbye. I should be saying goodbye. Absolute pleasure to have had you all here, and I'll see you next week. Cheerio.